Um, I welcome everybody to our November GSHA Utah chapter meeting, and happy to introduce Jennifer Ortiz, who is hang on with me a moment here. She is the director of the Utah Division of State History, and comes to state history from Utah Division of Arts and Museums, where she oversaw the State Museum Services program that services Utah's 250 plus museums through workshops, museum technical assistance, site visits, and grant funding for the last 7 years. I had no idea we had that many museums in the state of Utah. But anyway, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Ortiz. And Jennifer, welcome. And maybe you could just start by giving us a little bit more information about yourself.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Gloria, for the introduction. And thank you for having me this month to speak. So as Gloria mentioned, I'm the director for the Utah Division of State History, also known as the Utah Historical Society. So we have been around for 125 years. We actually just celebrated our 125th anniversary this past July. So a long storied organization. I've been in the role for about a little over a year and a half. I am the first woman who identifies as a minority, a Latina, in the role, which I'm very proud to be in this role. I have been brought on at a time where there's a lot of organizational change and a lot of amazing opportunities that I'm going to be sharing with you today that we're working on moving forward. So thank you so much for having me. I don't know if you want a little more background on myself personally or just my own areas of interest. Yes, Albert's saying yes. So my background is in public history, specifically museums. I got my master's degree from Tufts University, just outside of Boston, where I did my graduate work in 20th century American history, a focus on material culture and work in museums. So I've worked in museums all across the Boston area, and a job at the Utah Museum of Fine Arts actually brought me here in 2011. So I've been here in the state since 2011, working with cultural heritage institutions. I got my initial start working in collections management, and have most recently come from the Division of Arts and Museums, where I was doing more of that technical assistance. So helping other institutions across the state better their practices, their interpretation. It definitely comes from the lens of public history and how we share our community's stories. And so that's my background. I'm very passionate about telling a more inclusive narrative of the state. That's kind of what I had, my whole interview process was telling a more diverse and inclusive story of Utah as a state, because I'm sure this group very, very much knows that our history is incredibly nuanced and interesting and diverse. And I think the larger narrative about Utah's history is that it's a monolith, and it's not. And so I am all about trying to break that narrative and doing more work and research work, supporting that work across the state that helps us do that. So that's kind of the philosophy that I lead out with at the Utah Division of State History, and that our teams have been working on most recently. So just a little bit about me. And I live in Salt Lake City. I have 2 dogs and a husband, and very close to the Capitol. So I do my dog walks on the Capitol campus all the time if you're ever in the neighborhood.
That's great. Could I ask you a little bit about your personal history, as far as where you're from and family, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I'm originally from California. I was born and raised in Redlands, California, just inland Southern California, if those of you are familiar with it. My family background, I am Mexican American. My dad is from Chihuahua, Mexico, and my mom is Italian American, and I was raised in a home where I did not speak the language, and that was a very intentional thing that my dad chose. And so I've spent my entire adult life trying to reclaim language as part of my own practice. So it's something I'm working on as I grow and learn too as a person. I went to college. I moved to San Francisco. I went to the University of San Francisco. So I moved away when I was 18, and I haven't been back to California living there since I was 22. So all my family is still there, and all of my dad's family is still in Chihuahua. And so it's been great to get to visit and have them come and visit. And so that's my own personal history and background. But I very much view history and the work that I do as my own reclamation project of both my story and also language.
I think that's from what you've been saying, that's kind of a typical, I speak Spanish, I do speak Spanish, but I didn't grow up speaking at home because although my grandmother lived with, I had to speak to grandma in Spanish. She didn't speak English, but my parents, my mother wanted me to speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And because of her experience growing up in the 20s and 30s in Wyoming, actually. But it's interesting. My father's also from Chihuahua. Talking about 100 years ago, so I have no family there at all. I don't have any ties, so that's something in common, though. That's
yeah. Oh, I love that. There are so many people in my situation, both older, younger. I recently completed and this is another personal detail, but I recently completed a language program through an organization called Spanish Sin Pena, and it's all about adults, first and second generation adults who want to reclaim Spanish language, and but there's a lot of shame in family structures, and I know I felt that. I continue to feel that. I was most recently at an event at the Mexican consulate this past week, and Telemundo wanted to do an interview, but I couldn't do it in Spanish, and it's just like that. That's hard. That's very difficult for a professional who's trying to do outreach in communities that, English isn't the primary language. And so, but that program was really transformational because I think it removes a layer of that shame and what a lot of people feel when they can't speak the language.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd be interested then in hearing your presentation and what you have to tell us today.
Yeah, I'll drop the link later, but the name of the program is Spanish Sin Pena. And it was great. So I would be happy to share that information.
Okay.
I don't know I'm assuming this group is very familiar with the Utah Historical Society. That might be my assumption. So I put together a presentation, a little bit of an introduction to state history in the event that maybe you're familiar but haven't been connected with us most recently. And then most of the presentation is actually going to be talking about one of our major projects that we're working on, but I would love to open up the floor to talk about potential collaborations too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. If there are any questions, somebody might just have to holler at me because I know I won't be able to see the chat. So Gloria and maybe Albert, I'll ask you to just yell at me.
Yeah, there's one chat that came up when you lean forward. There's a glare on your face, and if you go back a little.
Okay. Yeah, I've been trying to. Sorry, the sun is weird this morning for me. There we go. Is that better? No, I still have that glare. Okay, is that better?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So let me go ahead and share. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to do, again, mostly a brief introduction to our organization, just in the event that people might not know us. So we are the Utah Division of State History, or I represent the Utah Division of State History. And, in the way, So we were founded in 1897. Like I said, we just celebrated our 125th anniversary this year as the Utah Historical Society, with the intent to expand the public's knowledge of Utah's past. It was very much started in sort of that post, LDS pioneer arrival, with the intent of wanting to preserve the history that was sort of developing within the valley specifically. It has since, of course, expanded, but it was very much object and archival focused. And we have since expanded. We are the state's designated state history organization, and there are state history organizations in every state across the country. And we really consider ourselves the recorder of the state's history. We partner with organizations like our Utah State Archives. Those are not, state archives and other organizations aren't necessarily in our organization, but we've mapped out a partnership that allows us to sort of understand what we collect and what kind of history we're talking about, and what organizations like State History is collecting, and the kind of history that they're talking about. So like I mentioned, we've since expanded our scope of work since 1897. We have several programs under the scope of the Utah Division of State History. We have three major programs within the scope of state history. The first is our public history program. And so that includes programs like National History Day, which is kind of like a science fair-esque program that allows kids from 4th grade on to 12th grade to compete in sort of this poster style session of history projects. So it teaches them original research skills. It teaches them how, what's a primary source, how to look at it, how to understand it. It's one of my favorite programs that we have at State History, because it gets youth involved at an early age and is really transformational. The kids that move on from our state program to nationals get to actually go to DC in the summer. We haven't been able to do that in the last 3 years. This next year is the first year that we'll be coming back to that. And I'm just so excited for the kids that get to compete in it, because they get to go to our nation's capital, they get to visit all these awesome museums, and they get to learn these, just the presentation skills, needed to be successful in today's world. And so it's a great program. If you've never been involved, we're always looking for judges, something we can easily share that information with this group here today. Also under the public history program is our Utah Historical Quarterly. So this is our scholarly publication. It's a both printed and digital publication that features our articles by scholars from both inside and outside the state on Utah's history. We've had some amazing scholarship that has come out of the Utah Historical Quarterly, and it's oftentimes a platform for up and coming scholars that move on to publishing their books and other great projects. So it's a wonderful resource that we have within the Division of State History. We have our Women's History Initiative, which is brand new to us over the last year. This is something that we received funding for from the Lieutenant Governor directly. She is very passionate about telling women's history in Utah and pulling out the narrative, again, undertold narrative in our state. And so we have an amazing historian that is working on this initiative. Her name is Catherine Kitterman, and she actually comes to us from Better Days. She was the director there. And so it's a beautiful partnership that we have with their organization. And she's been working on pulling out the thread of women's history within Utah's history. And then finally, our program, Peoples of Utah Revisited, which I will be talking about mostly after this. But it is a project that we are really excited about, and it's taking the opportunity of a very important anniversary in 2026 to revisit the original Peoples of Utah project. Another big program of ours, and I'm assuming this genealogical society is interested in it, is our cemetery program. We have a very robust burial records within our cemetery program, active and historic burial records. And we also have a preservation program. So preservation for both cemeteries and headstones. It's something that is very unique to Utah. A lot of the programs that exist elsewhere are for-profit programs. Ours is not because we are state funded. And so if you know of a historic cemetery or are connected to some of that across the state, let us know, because we're always looking to help support historic cemeteries and active cemeteries and their preservation programs. And then finally, this is a big part of our organization, our collections and library program. So we've got a couple big things in there that you might be engaged with in the future is our engagement room, which was formerly called our research center at the Rio Grande. Some of you might know that we have moved out of the Rio Grande. Actually, as of 2 weeks ago, we're formally out of the Rio Grande building. It was impacted by the March 2020 earthquake. And so we've been working since March of 2020 to get our staff and our collections out of that building. And we have finally completed that project. But we are reopening our engagement room at our new temporary collections center in Midvale, January of 2023. So we'll be doing a soft opening in December, kind of friends and family, just to test it out and make sure we know what we're doing, and then reopening to the public come January of 2023. And that's a space where you can request objects, request library collections to do original research. And of course, our collections we have a massive collection of artifacts, photographs, manuscripts. You can imagine just the amount of items that we've moved in the last couple of years. Our team is tired. So we are, a beautiful collection that you can also search online. And I'm happy to drop that link in the chat after I'm done with the conversation. And then finally, I think you can see this last bullet point. A huge project that we're currently working on is our future Museum of Utah, which is slated to open in 2026. We are the last state in the country to build a state history museum. Many states in the US have a designated state history museum that's often connected to their state historical organization. We're the last one to build it, and that's for many different reasons. But we're really, really excited to share that we'll be in a building up on the Capitol campus, and that will open in 2026. And we'll have 17,000 square feet of exhibitions. So an opportunity to talk about the history of our state, and then we'll have education rooms, our engagement room to interact with the collections and education staff. So we'll be staffing up and moving that. We've been working on this project for many years, but we're kind of full steam ahead, and we're hiring our second hire right now, our museum director, which we're really excited about. So big projects on the horizon. So I wanted to talk a little bit about getting involved with our team and the work that we're doing. A huge project, as I mentioned, is this Peoples of Utah Revisited project. And we launched this, it was soft launched, I want to say about 1.5 years ago. And we took an opportunity to connect this project to America 250. And America 250 is the commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. So in July of 2026, the country is going to be commemorating, acknowledging, celebrating this anniversary in a variety of ways. It's a huge anniversary. For those of you who remember the bicentennial, it's going to be very akin to that. And so this is our designated project as a state history organization to acknowledge 2026. For a state like Utah, it's our conversation around 1776 is much different. We were Mexico. And so how do we take this opportunity to capitalize on research that was already done from the bicentennial, and how to bring this research and contemporary conversation around history and relevancy up to present day. And so that's what the Peoples of Utah Revisited project is. For us, it's an opportunity to do this more inclusive historical work with communities that are here in the state, and just acknowledging that Utah has significantly changed in the last 50 years. And so the project itself, it's two-pronged. We're investing in new scholarship and research on the history of the state, focusing on underrepresented histories. And then the second prong is community history. So working with community groups like this and like others to help tell their own history, their own stories in the ways that they want to tell them, just acknowledging that traditional historical approaches aren't always the best way of telling history or somebody's story. And so this project really is focused on the last 50 years of the state. So since the 1976 project, the original Peoples of Utah, was completed, we're kind of picking up that legacy and bringing it up to present day. And so the umbrella has been expanded to include history that has not had an opportunity to be featured, like LGBTQ history, our state sovereign nations, indigenous nations, and just having a deeper understanding of the growing populations across Utah. I hope some of you are familiar with our original project, The Peoples of Utah, which was done by Helen Papanicolaou. Some of you might remember that it was a bicentennial project and credited as the first ethnic studies anthology of Utah. Helen Papanicolaou was a self-taught historian from Carbon County, a Greek woman who had deep ties to the mining community in Carbon County. And her story is so interesting, and to get to pick up that as a legacy project with the Peoples of Utah Revisited is such an honor. We really are just so thrilled to get to dig in deep and acknowledge all the incredible work that her and other scholars did in the 70s, and also acknowledge that, again, the state has shifted. It's changed quite a bit in the last few years. The original Peoples of Utah focused on communities such as African American and Black community here in Utah, Scandinavian, Italian, and my favorite, the Spanish-speaking peoples within Utah. And so we are going to be picking that up and adding to the work that was done from 76. For us in state history, this project was really transformative. Not only did it invest in new scholarship, but one of the biggest resources that came out of the original Peoples of Utah was the photograph collection. And so these are just a couple of examples of families or representative of families that are still here today and have a long legacy, a long history of being in our communities. And again, the Peoples of Utah project really helped transform our understanding of the history of the state. There was a misunderstanding that people of color only came because of, say, the Transcontinental Railroad. The Chinese community wasn't here until the Transcontinental Railroad. This project allowed for some of that understanding to be shifted. And so the biggest resource that we have that comes out of this project is our photograph collection, and that's still used today. I think I mentioned the event I was at the Mexican consulate earlier this week, and a bunch of the photos that we helped source for their exhibition on the anniversary of the consulate came from the original Peoples of Utah project. And so that legacy continues to live on today, and is something that we're hoping to continue to build out with the new Peoples of Utah Revisited. The impact was huge. So I talked a little bit about our photograph collection, but the legacy of the Peoples of Utah is something that really created a foundation for diversity in teaching of scholarship on Utah history, on ethnic studies, and just researching our collections, expanding what's in our collections. This image on the right is one of my favorites because it's from a publication that we produced, but through the Utah Historical Society. But the gentleman in the middle is Phil Notoriani, and he was deeply involved with the Peoples of Utah project, but he credits it with helping him get involved in public history, sharing his family history, which was Italian American history, and he was ultimately one of our directors of the Utah Historical Society. And so we look at this project as such an incredible legacy to continue to inspire new historians, and that's really what we're leaning into with the new Peoples of Utah Revisited project. I pulled this slide in. I provided a keynote for BYU's Hispanic Heritage Month for their history department, and we talked a lot about representing Latinos in Utah's history and just trying to pull out those threads, that narrative again. And so this was some of the data that I like to share with people who are asking, well, why are we digging in deep on Latino history, or why are we digging in deep on certain communities' history? And this is why, because our state has changed so much in the last 50 years. Census records tell us that, but we have to pull out these numbers in order for people to understand. We at State History want to be data driven, and the data is showing us that we need to shift the way in which we do our work to make sure that we're fully representing our communities today. So this number at the top is really interesting and almost shocking in a way when I first heard it, is that there are 125 languages and dialects spoken across the state. I believe 100 of them are spoken in Ranger School District alone. And so this is something that, like, it makes you pause and think, like, wow, this is an opportunity to really provide some context. Like, how did we get here? Who is actually here? Because that's not something that when people hear the word Utah, hear the name Utah, that they think of. They don't think of 125 languages and dialects spoken. And so it's something that I like to share. And then these numbers kind of reflect, again, the increase of the Latino population across our state and across Salt Lake Valley. And, just the increase in self-identity and just how people are identifying as different races. Again, we're not a monolith in this state anymore, and perhaps never was. And that's something that we like to talk about at State History. So as I mentioned, for the New Peoples of Utah Revisited project, an arm of the project is investing in scholarship. And so we actually just had an info session yesterday. We'll have another one on Monday and probably a few more in December about what we're looking for specifically for new scholarship. But the goal of the new scholarship really is to invest in up and coming voices. We're really excited to get students involved, younger people involved, in non-traditional scholars. We've had a lot of conversations, especially with community colleges, of getting folks that are non-traditional students through the door and supporting them as they do their own research and scholarship. We're working with our university and college network and really wanting to make sure that we're establishing those deep connections across our state. We have amazing resources across the state, and working through those as hubs for research is a priority of the project. And then finally, we have funding that was secured by Senator Jamie Iwamoto for the Peoples of Utah Revisited project in our last legislative session. We were very fortunate to receive that funding, and she believed in the work that State History is doing. And so because of that funding, we were able to bring on staff to help focus specifically on this project, but we're also dedicating money to paying scholars for their research. Because it is high time that we acknowledge that this is a skill and it deserves to be paid for. And so that's something that we're investing in as well. The other arm, as I mentioned, is community history. And so this is an acknowledgement that, traditional history practices aren't necessarily the only ways to capture somebody's history and narrative. And so this is a focus on the everyday lived experiences of Utahns, and a focus on non-academic spaces, because the scholarship side will focus on those academic scholarly spaces. This is an opportunity for community groups to get involved who might not necessarily be comfortable with traditional history practices. And so instead of being an extractive model, we're really relying on our partnerships with community groups to do things like collective history and memory workshops. So just getting together and talking about our family stories or our community stories. Developing family and community archives with that shared authority. One of the things that we've heard in traveling the state, working on our own strategic plan, is that people don't know that A, State History is interested in community-based history, but B, that their history is important. A lot of families, and I know this has happened with me and my own family, they say, well, why do you care? Like, why would you want this photograph, or why would you care about this recipe? And it's about demonstrating the significance of everyday people in our community. We are piloting right now scan and release events. So working with community groups to help them digitize important photographs, archival records, all sorts of things. We're testing that out to then hopefully launch this as a community option in next year and in future years. And then offering some grant funded projects that State History are facilitators, but we're not the owners. Again, really investing in those community groups and providing the funding and the project management resources that a lot of groups might need but don't have. And so again, saying that communities know how to tell their own history. We're not here to dictate what that looks like. We're here to provide the resources and tools to be the facilitators to help sort of tease out those stories. And again, these goals really are to focus on gathering untold stories and amplifying underrepresented voices. We're really trying to demonstrate the value of preserving one's history, especially with our community groups. And then the deliverables, so to speak, we have a few different platforms that we're working on right now. So one of them is to expand our collections and archives. So really filling in the gaps within State History's collection. I can tell you we're piloting right now a repository agreement with Sama Hadithi, which is a community group that focuses on the Black and African American experience in Utah. We're providing them a space to house their collections objects, and they're helping us sort of fill in the gaps in our collections because we have some, but not enough objects that represent the Black and African American experience in Utah. So that's just one example of how we're trying to expand our collections and be more representative of the state. We'll have a public-facing website in 2026 specifically geared for Peoples of Utah Revisited. So it'll be a web resource where you can access some of these projects that were worked on, some of the historical narrative that is happening over the course of the next few years. We'll be publishing a whole series of Utah Historical Quarterlies specifically on Peoples of Utah Revisited work. So all of that scholarship that we're investing in will have a place to live either through the Utah Historical Quarterly or through the website. And then finally, because we are working on the Museum of Utah right now, all of this content is going to filter up and out eventually through the Museum of Utah, either through some of our inaugural exhibitions or future exhibitions. For us at State History, it's all about building trust and those lasting relationships. And I tell my team time and again, we move with the speed of trust. A lot of these relationships are new for us because we've never worked with some of these communities before. And so it takes time and patience. But this is something that will benefit us and hopefully our community groups in the long run. So we're really excited about this project. One more resource that I want to make sure I share with this group and just to be aware of, which we were excited about. We've been partnering with the Utah Education Network, UEN.org, to create Latino resources. So this is a resources page actually for teachers, for educators. And it's been a partnership with us, Utah Humanities, the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Utah. It's just a space where all of the resources that we at least know of locally and some nationally to get together for Utah educators. So again, K through 12 as a means of sharing this information. And so this is on UEN's website, uen.org. And this is something that we're hoping to do for different community groups as we move forward. There's an amazing resource on UEN right now for about Native American history and also cultural resources. So we're trying to do this in partnership with community groups. So it's not, State History doesn't own this. We're simply helping facilitate and fill in the gaps in some cases. But it's a resource that I wanted to share with you just so you were aware of it. And that's it. I mean, we have a lot going on at State History, but Peoples of Utah really is one of those big projects that we're focused on at the moment. And I would love to see this group get involved. And it sounds like there might be opportunities in the future to get involved. So I would love to invite anyone who has questions.
I have a question, comment. Thank you for that great presentation. And I'm glad to see you on board. I sent you an email earlier I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but I would love to collaborate with the State Historical Society. We've been doing some oral histories here with the group. I kind of got hooked into the group through Maria as well. Became an officer so I could kind of push along this oral history project that I initially started kind of in Wyoming when I was at the University of Wyoming. But I'm just pleased to hear all of the resources, and I'd like to even start talks with you and Marriott Library about possibly linking up what the archive that we have started to create with the Historical Society as well. And if you have time, I'd love to meet with you in person or through Zoom as well in the coming week or weeks or whatever. But I don't want to take up too much time.
No, I saw your email briefly. I didn't get a chance to respond, but I'd love to. And I think that's exactly what I was hoping would come out of this. I know Maria mentioned the oral history project, and I told her, like, I want those, like, let's talk more. So, you know, however we can, I'll reach out and follow up, and we can schedule some time.
Yeah, and it's also timely because I'm getting ready to submit a couple of proposals for some funding to kind of move it further along.
Yeah.
One that's institutional with the University of Utah, and another one with the University of Texas Center for Mexican American Studies as well.
Wonderful.
But yeah, there's stronger proposals if we have community partners. And so I think us working with you as well as the GSHA would strengthen my proposals. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, I have a question. This is Rosa. So on your state history, say for instance, California, where would we be able to find the program there within our state? Because you said each state has designated a particular program for the program. So how would I find that?
So California, they're the California Historical Society, and California is interesting. They're set up a little bit differently. They get some state funding, but they're a private nonprofit. So if you Google California Historical Society, it should pop up.
Okay, great. All right. And another question. So I know, this was a really good presentation, and the part of it with the community, you have to build up the trust with the community, and it takes time. And so that I thought that was a good thing. And I didn't get that Latin resource. You said an acronym, and I missed it. If you can give me that acronym to find that resource.
Yeah, so it's uven.org. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Okay, great. That's good.
The acronym stands for the Utah Educators Network. And so this is a platform that teachers utilize for lesson plan building, even just accessing lesson plans. It's information. It also serves as a platform for it was an educational tool that was used pretty heavily during COVID and when classes were remote.
Okay.
But there's a lot of resources on it. So
and that's good to know. And what I like too is that everything's data driven. I really like that data that you provided. And so that being said, where would you find that? Would you find that in the census? Is that where you got your data?
So all of the data that I pulled, that slide came actually from the demographics that the University of Utah has been compiling through it was Pam Perlick's project. So that was most recently done after the 2020 census.
Okay, great. Great. And then what I really like is that the young individuals, the folks that are taking pride in their history and going forward with, learning more of the history, the generations, because we're all here, most of us I see, they're older, I'm an older as well, but the newer generation, that's good that they're taking those putting their education forward and capturing all that.
Yeah. And one of the resources that we just recently launched is a youth oral history guide, because that's something that we've been encouraging youth to do as part of their National History Day project. And so, Ed, as you think about oral history work, how young people get involved, we have resources for that too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
okay.
I have my students do oral histories. I have a class.
Oh, awesome.
U.S. Latino diaspora, And my students are required to do an oral history, and I recruit from this group, but I train them over the course of the semester how to do an
I
oral.
love that. I love that.
Okay.
I was chatting with somebody from Family Search recently, and you probably know him, Arturo from Family Search, and he was talking about all of the high school students. He talks when he goes into schools and talks about
Right.
genealogy, and we were laughing because it's almost like you have to trick students into doing genealogy work and oral history work by calling it something else, because it's true. You know, getting young people involved at an early age is so important, because it, in a lot of ways, this work feels old to young people. But when you start telling them, like, have you talked to your grandma? Have you asked about her stories, her history? And when you can pull like nuggets of information, that's when the students and young people get so excited and involved. So, but we were laughing. It's like, we got to rebrand genealogy somehow to something else so they get excited about it.
Well, I think it's a little like the Family History Library downtown. Years ago, it was the Genealogical Society, and so they rebranded.
Oh, yeah.
I could see where they did. I was really excited to see. I have that original book by Helen Papanikolaou, The Peoples of Utah. And at the time, it was really interesting for me because a lot of the people, or some of the people in the book, were people that I knew as a child. My family came here in 1942. So there was obviously already an established community. The Mexican community was actually very small, and then you had the people from the New Mexico roots, you know. But also, I never met Helen Papanikolaou, but as a student, I worked at the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. I had work study, you know, but her sister was the secretary there. So
I didn't know that. Yeah,
Mrs. Theodore, and so
okay.
Yeah, so it was. So that's partly how I knew about Helen Papanikolaou. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and her family is still around and involved in our organization. They actually fund one of the awards we give out annually through the Utah Historical Society. So we're still connected to the family, which is really great. You know, our communities are deeply tied to one another and small, right? Yeah. So it's so great to hear these kinds of connections. I love it.
Well, I know that even before, well, I guess when I was a child, but my parents knew some of the Greek people, and there was a lot of integration, which you don't see today. But there were a lot of friendships and a lot of just, I guess, probably living next door to each other at a time when a lot of the minorities lived on the west side, and that's kind of where my family lives. So,
well, I have little notes from Helen Papanikolaou where she asked about my child and that, and I guess I better save those and tell him he better treasure them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But she always called him, she would always say, how is Ignatius? She was always calling him Ignatius instead of Ignacio. For the saint. What a wonderful woman. But I also took her class. She offered Peoples of Utah one evening. One semester, but it was in the evenings. I just loved her.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, Jennifer, this is Albert. You spoke about the Utah Historical Quarterly. How is that available?
So it's in two formats. One, you can get it printed and then digitally. So I can send this group, maybe Albert or Gloria, whoever I send it to, and they can spread it.
Yeah, we could disseminate it.
Yeah, that would be great. You have to purchase a membership to get access to it.
Okay. And then the other is you spoke about a collections and library that's in Midville.
Yes.
Where is it in the Midville? Because that's where I was raised. So
we just moved into we're right off of the 7200 exit. There is a state-owned building there. I think it used to be, I can't remember what it used to be, but it's a massive, like 30,000 square foot building. A lot of the like COVID testing, like pop-up units are in the parking lot still. So if you drive in that area, I don't know the address right off the top of my head.
Is it east or is it on the east side or the west side of that exit?
I believe it's on the east.
Okay.
But we'll be sharing
Yeah.
where the engagement room is. We'll be doing some marketing in December around the grand reopening, and we'll probably have a couple of events in January and one probably on a Saturday. So I don't know when you all meet, but maybe that's an event that you'll want to attend in person.
Is that the place where you said it's Haditha was going to be having their presentation?
Okay. That is the location of our temporary collection storage and also our engagement room. The work that we're doing with Sama Hadithi is we're piloting a repository. And so what that means is we're piloting being a space where they can store their objects temporarily while their goal is to build a museum.
Yeah.
Separate from us, although I have feelings about building a separate museum, but temporarily providing a safe space, because right now the objects that they have in the collection are living in the founder's like basement. And so that's not a safe place. Like, we want to support community held collections and not necessarily take ownership of it. So we're seeing if we have the capacity to do that for other groups as well.
Okay, and that's Robert Birch.
That's Robert. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's given the presentation to our group.
Oh,
before.
yeah. Robert's all over the place. Yeah, he's a busy guy.
He's really quite active.
Yeah. So we've been working with them because Robert has a bunch of things in his home.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, let's see. Do we have? I could see there's. Let me see if there's. Did you look at the chat, Albert? Okay.
I think we're current on the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I see we are. Any other questions for Jennifer?
Yeah. Jennifer, if we have something that we think might be historical or no one knows about, who would we share that with? I know I ran across an article that I got from West High School years ago, and it was highlighted a Black student that I had gone on, and I thought, who knows this? And I don't know if that would be in any historical records, but like if we find things that are published somewhere that we may not be out in the public, would we forward those to you?
You can always forward things to me, and then I can make sure, if it's archival or if it's objects, I can make sure it gets to the collections person. We have a once monthly acquisitions committee. We do have sort of guidelines that help us determine, what should come into the collection and maybe what doesn't, because oftentimes we might have duplicates of something, or for instance, like a newspaper article. A lot of things are digitized nowadays. It's just a matter of finding where, or knowing where they are, and our team usually knows where they are. So you're always welcome to send stuff my way, and I'll make sure it gets into the right person's hands.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Ed Trujillo. I enjoyed your presentation. Can you search your website for, like, if you're trying to find the history of Latino organizations like Socio and LULAC, can you search your site to get that information?
Right now, no. So that is what we're working on with this new Peoples of Utah Revisited project. Some of those resources are available. What our public history team has done, Ed, is put together a bibliography, and it's very much in draft form on like history of communities across the state to just identify like where are the gaps in certain histories of communities. And that's kind of how we realize like, oh, we don't have a lot on, you know, the acronym that's often used is AAPI communities, but like history on Pacific Islanders, on you know, Filipino community here in Utah. So that's part of what this project is hoping to address, is to get some of those written histories, that 30,000 foot view. So unfortunately at the moment, no, those are not available, but the goal is to work on them.
Thank you.
So we need to make sure we have an address or an email address so that if people want to send things to you.
I'm going to put it right in the chat.
Okay, that'd be great.
While you do that, Jennifer, my name is Jesse Garcia from the Ogden area. Thank you for the invite to this group.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, I look forward to continuing, and we do have a lot of history here in Ogden, everything from American farm workers to railroad workers to everything else. And so I'd really like to get in contact with you, but right now my grandson's calling and I need to pick him up.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And we love the history of Ogden, and actually just recently brought on, her name is Holly Andrew, and she was the former director of the Ogden Union Station, and did a lot of community work there. So
yeah, I used to work for the Department of Aging, and I used to run the volunteers, so I know all about them at the Union Station and other places. And just a little bit of background information. I'm the first Mexican American, how would I say, that I was voted into or elected to the Ogden City Council in 1993, served from 1994 to 2010. So,
oh, thank you
history,
for representing.
Oh, not a problem. But again, thank you. And Margie, thanks for getting me involved. You all have a wonderful day.
Thank you for showing.
Hey,
Yeah.
my pleasure. Thanks for the invite. You all have a good day.
You too. I also dropped my email address, but also the link to our website. Again, it's kind of, we're redoing our website, so apologies that it is kind of hard to navigate at the moment, but there are a lot of resources if you do spend some time on it. There's just so much. I'm still finding things after a year and a half. So we'll be making it much more easy to use in the future, but at least for now, it's a landing spot.
Thank you. I got some noise in the background here. Let me just, okay, any other questions for Jennifer? Well, Jennifer, it's been really wonderful to have you on and to meet you. I also wanted to mention I'm on the board of Ortiz de Mexico in Utah, so I had heard about the UEN project recently. So yeah, they're a great organization. Any other questions? Well, we're going to begin our general meeting.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I think
Excellent.
I'm going to hop off, but I so appreciate the invitation. And I will send whatever resources you want your way. And Ed, I will be in contact with you.
And we'd love to have you just join us anytime for our meetings.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.
Okay, thank
Oh,
you.
you too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.